Welcome to the American Society of Quality Lean Enterprise Division 2015 webinar series. By listening to our webinar series, you will get the best of the best in the lean industry. Stay tuned to the end of this recording for more details. This month, our speaker is Tom Dunn. Tom is the principal of D-Bar Innovations and created the Lean Six Sigma Mentoring Factory that has since managed over 18,000 projects. As a result of using the Mentoring Factory, the average project cycle times for the projects were reduced from 13 weeks to 5 weeks while maintaining the project quality. Now, let's join Tom as he presents Lean Six Sigma Deployment Made Easy.
Well, thank you very much, Paul. Thank you. Well, we're going to have fun today. I'm going to give you a lot of meat and potatoes. This webinar, I really wanted to structure this around things that you don't find in books, you don't see in training. It's things that I've learned through just hard work and blunt force through the 30 years that I've been doing Lean and Six Sigma. So you won't see the things that we're going to talk about aren't things that you're probably going to find in class or in a book. And in fact, in some cases, some of the things that I'm going to be showing that I've done as a benchmark, you're going to see that they may even contradict with some books. But let's go ahead and go forward. So the first poll question is, who selects your Lean Six Sigma projects? And the answers would be either project leaders, management team, we don't do projects, or other.
And we'll leave it open for just a couple of minutes here, or a couple of seconds, I should say, and we'll have some numbers for you, Tom. Again, I just really appreciate you covering for Dave last minute like this. Really appreciate you doing this.
Dave's got some pretty big shoes to fill, so I got to step it up.
That's true. Looks like we have 11% project leaders, 71% management team, 11% we don't do projects, and 7% in the other category.
In the other category. Okay. Well, this is all about Lean and Six Sigma deployment. So this is based on projects. So if you do continuous improvement where it's a cultural type thing where everybody's improving their own process areas, this is probably going to have less of an impact for you. This is really going to be focused around people that do Lean projects or Six Sigma projects. It may not be the right, you might use PDCA or some other format, but if you're doing project work, this is going to probably be very valuable for you. So the first subject we're really going to go into, and I think that this is going to help out a lot. It's helped me a tremendous amount, which is how is a Lean Six Sigma deployment managed? My Lean Six Sigma deployments, and again, I've gone through 39 successful deployments now, and my deployments, I manage them just like the core business and servicing. So I look at the business wherever I'm putting on a deployment, and whatever that service is or whatever that production environment is, I create this Lean Six Sigma environment as a subservice inside of their business. Said differently, I manage it just like a small service business that's embedded into the core company, and its sole purpose is to service the management team's needs. So those folks that said that the management team is the ones that select the projects, that's actually really, really good news, because in a moment we're going to see some Pareto charts of what the number one failure item is for project failure, and one of the number one failure items is either no management support or we've lost priority and things like this. So it's really, really critical that the voice of the customer in this case be management. We've got to service management because we need their support. Which goes to the next slide. The management is the customer. So even though we often have various internal and external customers to serve, the one that is the most critical for a Lean Six Sigma deployment is absolutely the management team. Let's look a little deeper. So managers are typically business acumen focused. They're going to be looking at the customers, they're going to be looking at the shareholders, they're going to be looking at the business as a whole, and how do we make this a long-term, successful, productive business. So they have a keen understanding of and are aware of exactly what the customers and the shareholders need. So as project teams, we must focus on what management needs. If teams deliver what management needs, there will be a good synergy between management and project teams. There will also be great project support and project resources. And not having project support or project resources is the #1 failure mode for projects that either don't meet their objectives or are significantly tardy or late. So here's a critical message. If management does not select your project, so those folks that said either other or they said that the project leader selected the projects, that's okay. But if management does not select the projects being worked on, project leaders should consult with management to see what business problems they need help with. So if I'm a project leader and I selected my own project, I really want to go to management and say, this is what I want to work on, because I really want to make sure that I satisfy that customer, because that's the customer that's going to be ponying up resources, ponying up anything that I need as far as roadblock removal. The management team is the ones that's going to help me do that. So I've got to be working on what's most important for them. Which comes to poll question number 2. What is your company's project yield? Now, you may or may not measure this. So if you don't measure it, let's take a little bit of a guess. And what I mean by this, in case you're unfamiliar, what I'm asking is if you launched, let's say, 100 projects in a year, or if you closed 100 projects a year, what percentage of those would have met both the timeline and the objective that it was supposed to improve in the first place? And your answers would be either not sure, equal to or less than 60% yield, equal to or less than 80% yield, or greater than 80% yield.
Just about done here, Tom.
All right.
Looks like the final results are 17% not sure, 44% less than or equal to 60%, 20% less than or equal to 80%, and 19% greater than 80%.
Well, the 19% that's greater than 80%, that's actually really, really good. I mean, when you compare yourself against project performance across the board, that's really, really exceptional. So kudos to that. Now, the rest of you, there's really no reason to be too worried or bummed out about it, but the reality is if this is a business, if this is a Lean Six Sigma factory that's inside of your business, we wouldn't be able to stay afloat if our regular business performed at 44% or it's at less than 60% yield. It would just be extremely high cost. Our customers would be completely dissatisfied. And again, since management is our customers, and I really want you to look at that this way. Yeah, we have external customers, and they're very, very important. But our first line of customers really got to be management. And if we give management a 60% or less yield, management's going to really have a hard time investing into that business. So we've got to be able to figure out ways. I'm going to show you some in the next few minutes. But we really got to figure out ways to get our yield up to a level that would be indicative of a typical production or a typical service company. So the next subject that I'd like to share, I've only got 3 different subjects I'm going to talk about, and this is the second one. How do you measure success? So in business, you might measure safety, quality, delivery costs, maybe business growth, things like this. If you're in healthcare, you might be looking at things like patient experience and so on. But whatever you measure in your core business, you can measure Lean Six Sigma deployments in the same way. As an example, you can measure project yield, first pass yield, rolled throughput yield. So every time you go through a toolgate review of whatever the methodology you're using, whether it's DMAIC or if you're using PDCA for a lean event or whatever, as you're going through, you could use the first pass yield as every time you go through a different phase. Did you go through that without having any defects, having to go back because the toolgate review sent you back for some rework? So these are different ways to be able to measure the quality, how well we were able to produce the expected results of each phase and ultimately the project. And as far as delivery goes, it's just like as if you was running a service business or a production business, same thing. You could be measuring on-time delivery. We had an expected timeline. How did we do based on the expected timeline? We could look at lead time. We could look at cycle time, process efficiency. How much time did I add to this project, or how much time was the project having value added to it versus how much time did the project have no value added to it? These things are all really good measures. And I'm not going to go through them all, but probably the best way to look at this is the way that you measure things in your core business right now. You already have the tools. You're already familiar with those ways of measuring. You really need to start applying those kind of measures into the Six Sigma deployment or Lean Six Sigma deployment, because you really do. You need to run it like a business. It's got to be run with the highest level of quality, the quickest delivery, and the lowest cost. If those three things aren't met, it's going to be real difficult to have a sustained partner with management. Management, unfortunately, I mean, I've been there before, and management, just because of the way the energies and the dynamics are, if we don't give them quick returns, they're probably going to lose interest and have to focus on things that give them quick returns. So when we're talking about measures, let's look at quality. And this is my actual quality. This is the actual quality of the DBAR Innovations Project Factory. And again, what we did was me and my two brothers are all master black belts. They've since retired. I've got a few years left. But this is actual results. So over an 11-year period, we retired this factory in 2011. Well, actually, the beginning of 2012. But in the beginning of 2012, the Lean Six Sigma factory, which is what we called it, completed 18,200 and some projects. But we also generated 636 failures. And the good news is, I mean, it's kind of insulting for me to say that we had 636 failed projects, but we learned a lot from these 636 projects. So here's what we learned. The number 2 Pareto items, if you look at the failure, the reason or the cause of failure, which ultimately resulted in about 68% of all the defects, was either because of the project wasn't a priority to management, and therefore they didn't get any support, or there was poor champion support. There was no roadblock removal. There was nobody to really be able to move obstacles when they were in the project team's way. This is real, and again, this isn't a small data set. This is a pretty large data set. And again, when we did this project factory where we were in operation, we did this for all different types of industries and multiple different companies. So this is really a cross section of every application you could possibly have when it comes to doing project work. These are the real deal. So we have got to manage our projects in a way to make sure that they're managers' priorities and that the champion's priorities. And champion's usually a manager. So really it all comes down to we've got to keep our managers happy by delivering the goods and working on what they want us to work on. So differently, if we look at this slide, so on the left we got project leaders, and they've got to be, again, management focused. And if the improvement team and the project leaders management focused, if you look at the blue arrow on the right, if we support management, then the management team, which is business focused, will support the project teams. It's a synergy, it's a cycle, it's a relationship between the project team and the leader versus the management. Management, at the very beginning of a deployment, they're almost always open to supporting the deployment. But just like a 401k or any other kind of an investment, if I invest and I invest and I invest and I don't get a quick return, I don't get something out of it that's valuable, I'm going to stop investing. And Lean Six Sigma or a deployment like this is really, really about the exact same thing. We have got to be in this synergy loop where we constantly give quick returns to management. For the payoff for that is management will then reimburse us with support, give us the resources we need, give us the training we need, give us the time we need, and things like that. Very important. So one of the things I'm going to be doing is anybody that's participating today, I'm going to be giving you a web-based application. I told Paul that I'd like to do that, and I'm going to. We're going to have to do it offline because this is a short webinar. I don't have time to go into much detail, but what I would like to do, let me just switch gears here for a moment. And I want to give you an example of how you can boost synergy. Because again, one of the main things we've got to do is we have absolutely got to what we've got to do is we've got to make sure that management is on board, excited, enthused, and going to benefit big time from what projects we're working on. So inside this web application, let me move this down here. Inside this web application that I'm going to be giving you guys, and gals, I'm so sorry, is going to be a place where you can manage all your projects, add project ideas, the whole company can. It's going to be a pretty cool device for y'all. But really it's a place where you can stick in your project ideas by title, define what the problem statement is, or the business case is, and on the right-hand side, now this is going to be really, really critical, we can set these attributes to whatever management's really finding necessary for the company, the vision of the company. And then what you'll do is every time you put a project idea in, you assess how important it is for those attributes that management is really keeping a keen eye on. So for quality as an example, let's say it has a very high impact. And then down here, again, these attributes are also adjustable by you, but where it says project risks, these are things that I've seen in those 636 projects that have failed, some of the drivers of that. So what I want to do is also want to say, okay, well, if we did this project idea that you put in, how well is management going to support that? Is management going to be really excited about that, or are they going to be not so much? How hard is it going to be to implement? How technically challenging is it? Is there a measurement system to be able to measure what we're trying to improve? Things like this. So it's really trying to assess how much risk is there if we went as far as failing the project, how much project failure risk is there if we started this project, and how impactful is it going to be for my business? So again, I'm going to be giving you this, and I'll put on a separate training for you to show you how to use it. I don't want to give it to you and have you not know how to use it fully. It's very intuitive, but it still deserves a little bit of time for me to get you squared away. But if you do this, if you put in project ideas that's based on what's important to the management team, and we keep management in a loop, they are the key stakeholder you could possibly have. So we really got to keep an eye on satisfying that customer, because if not, again, we're going to break the synergy, and therefore we're going to break the loop that gives us resources, time, and removes roadblocks. So let's look at delivery next. So if we look at on-time delivery as an example, again, out of the 11 years that we've done this and over 18,000 projects, 474 of them were late. Now we got our cycle time over this period when we did, when we were running this project factory for Lean Six Sigma projects. We got our cycle time from the beginning of the control phase. Once the control plan was documented, as an example, we no longer measured it as far as our performance goes, because a lot of times the cycle time of the control phase is going to be mandated by management. They might say we need 2 months or a quarter or 30 days, so we can't really include that in our process cycle time. But if you look at the top fail modes, then the top causes of being late is, and it's kind of ironic, because what Mr. Mann was going to talk about was standard leader work. And when we do either optimization of processes or optimization of procedures, I mean, one of the things we've always understood, there's very little controversy over the fact that we need to have standard work. Anybody that's going to provide a service or build a widget, they've got to have standard work to reduce variability and to lower the cycle time. And yet, very few people that do Lean or Six Sigma projects have anything other than the training that they were provided. There's really no standard work. There may be a checklist, but what we really need is we need to be able to have best-in-class standards for people to drive projects. When we put standards in place, we reduced our cycle time of projects. Not only our on-time delivery was significantly affected, but our overall cycle time of projects went from about just under 3 months to about 26 work days, which is a little over 5 weeks. So we've had a great and a drastic improvement on reducing project cycle time. And again, if we're going to run it like a business, we have got to look at cycle time. We've got to reduce the time invested into producing whatever we're producing. In this case, we're producing project success. And again, if you look at management, what management wants is management wants short cycle times. They want us to get in there, put together some pragmatic, good solutions that are sustainable, and move on to the next problem. They want quick returns. This like again a 401k. They want to be able to invest and get reward quickly, and we've got to do everything we can to do that as well. And again, I'm not going to bring it open right now for the sake of time, but in the system in the system I'm going to be providing you with. You can change the standard operating procedures for every kind of workflow from PDCA to 5S to Kaizen to Lean Six Sigma. They're all inside the system. You can change the workflow. I've given you a workflow that I use, but you can change it. But again, it's standards. The key thing, I'd say the key thing to really consider when creating standards or standard operating procedures for project leaders is that you give them milestones or you give them expectations, things that have to be done. Like as an example, in a define phase, we always have to have a problem statement. We always have to have an objective statement. We always have to have certain things. That's where I stop. I don't mandate and try to squeeze them down to the point where use this tool, hold this wrench this way, and things like that. Because what I want to do is I want to give them a standard or a set of guides. But what I don't want to do is I don't want to stifle innovation, creativity, out-of-the-box thinking. So we really want to create a standard approach that reduces variation between project leaders and even between projects within the same project leader. But what we don't want to do is we don't want to stifle their minds. So poll question number 3. How many project leaders does a company need? Now the answers would be, I've been trained. I've probably read many of the books that you all have read. I've been trained probably by many of the same people that you've been trained by, and we've got the same sources. And so I want to just ask, what's your thoughts? What's your opinion on this very important question? How many project leaders does a company need? 1% of employees, 3% of employees, all indirect labor, or other?
Tom, while they're going through that, I did have a question. The My Hawkeye system that you've been talking about, you
Yes.
indicated that you're going to give us a copy if we would like. Is there any limits on that copy, or is there any cost associated with it, and how will that work?
Well, what it's going to be is what I've got to do is I'm going to be creating each one of these for each of these individuals. So what it's going to require is I'm going to need to create a login account for everyone. So I need to get somebody offline. We just need to talk about it, and that's my last slide shows you how to do that. And as far as the limitations go, there's no limitations of using it, except it's going to be for a single user. If you want to use it for enterprise, it's still really a low cost. And again, I'm not here to sell anything, so I don't even want to talk about money. But what I'm giving you is free, and what I'm giving you is you can use it forever. And I think you're going to be really excited about it because there's a lot of really nice things in there that'll be really helpful.
Okay, have the answer to the poll results, and I also have one more question. So let's talk poll results first.
Okay, let's hear the poll results.
23% said 1% of the employees, 28% said 3%, 23% said all indirect labor, 26% said other.
Other, okay. Well, every one of these answers that I created this poll question, every one of these answers I've been taught. Because I've been trained multiple times by multiple people. I like seeing what other people are teaching and things. So I've heard all these answers. So I was programmed to think this way. And again, through the experience I had with the Project Factory, some things I've done that benefited me greatly was not found in a book, and I found in my training. And I want to show you what I'm thinking, what my opinion is. Again, everybody is going to have to look at what I say and what you read and what you've got in training, and you're going to have to say what works for me. But this worked for me, and I believe it would work for you. What was the question before I go on, Paul?
The question was, in your experience, what are the keys to getting management involved?
The biggest key for getting management involved, and if you've already broken this bridge, so again, that synergy thing is easily broken, because if teams don't get project support, they don't get time, money, and resources, they're going to start stalling out. If they get that, and management team doesn't get quick returns, they're going to stall out. It takes those two things. So if you got off to a bad deployment, let's say that that's the scenario. You got off to a bad deployment. Management's already got this idea of what they're going to get for their return on investment, and project teams already have an idea of what they're going to get for support, and it's not pretty. So the first thing we would have to do is we would have to say, hey, look, forgive me. Let's hit the reset button. I want to look at this differently now. I don't want to look at this as some abstract Lean Six Sigma thing that somehow comes in this big black box that we don't know what's going on. But from this day forward, I want to run it like a business. And guess what? You're my customer. I'm going to do these projects because I want to make you shine. So if you go at it at that approach, more than likely they'll give you another chance. If all managers doesn't support it, if all managers say, look, I've been down that road, I'm not helping you anymore because you didn't give me a return, what I would do is I would find if there's even one manager that says, you know what, I'll give you another shot, then you make sure that manager shines above all other managers. And those other managers are going to say, you know what, I want in. How come you don't do any projects for me? But what we've got to do is when we start a project, it can't be about projects. It's got to be about return on investment. We've got to solve managers' problems. And when I say return on investment, it doesn't necessarily always have to be about money, but it does have to be about what does the manager really care about, what's eating their lunch, how do we take that problem off their shoulders? If we look at it that way, and that's the business I'm talking about that's inside the core business, this Lean Six Sigma business that's inside the core business, it has got to look at managers as the customers, and we've got to look at it as in how do I make that manager shine? And a lot of times that's missing. But that's the only way you're going to save that relationship. It's like any other relationship. If you don't bring anything to the table, that relationship's going to starve. And this is the same thing. This is the same thing. Was there another question in my old age? I just forgot it. Are we good?
That was it for now.
Okay. All right. I hope that helped. And if it didn't, give some more details, and I'll see if I can address it. If not during the webinar, but shortly after. So here's what I would say when it comes to training resources, whether it's champions, executive leadership, whether it's green belts, lean practitioners, black belts, master black belts. Here's what I would suggest. First of all, the question is, how many Lean or Six Sigma practitioners does the customer or management want to pay for? Now, if we look at this deployment and we apply the same Lean rules and Lean principles that we apply into our business, that's what we would be asking. If I was a service company, how many service lines would I buy? I would buy enough to keep up with demand. And if I was a manufacturing plant, I said, how many production lines do I need? I'd get enough production lines to keep up with demand. We have to apply that same thought process right here. If I don't need 16 machines, or in this case, 16, let's say, green belts or lean practitioners, because my company can only support driving 5 projects simultaneously or 5 service lines, why do I want 16 machines? Why do I want to pay for 16 green belts to get trained? Why do I want 16 green belts to either be sitting on the sidelines, not involved in a project, or being under supported because we can't support 16 projects? Either way, it's a bad equation. So let me keep on continuing because I actually short-circuited this. Let's look at this next slide. So let's use the same logic we use in our business. Companies typically acquire enough parallel services or production lines to keep up with customer demand. Deployments should acquire enough practitioners to keep up with management's project needs, but not more than they can properly support. So if you look at a project, you're going to need a champion involved to be able to remove roadblocks that the project leader doesn't have enough leverage to remove. You're going to need the leadership team to help select the project, or at least approve the project that you've selected if they're not selecting it. You're going to need somebody to go through toll gate reviews. You're going to need somebody to be a partner in this project. If you don't have enough partners for all the project leaders, that project leader is going to have a real high level of risk of failure, and we don't want that. So if you look at the little equation down below, it's just a pretty simple equation, but demand divided by capacity per line equals the lines needed. And in this case, it would be, let's say that the management team said, look, we can afford to run 5 projects simultaneously or 3 projects simultaneously, and each greenbelt had a capacity of 1 project. Then if they can only support 3 projects and each practitioner can only drive 1 project at a time, we really only need 3 practitioners. Because if we have 10 and management again can't support it, they're going to have problems. They're going to have real big problems. Again, the #1 failure mode for failed Lean Six Sigma projects and even Lean Six Sigma deployment failures at that high level is because there's no engagement or management involvement, or not enough. So what we don't want to do is we don't want to start any projects and just get a bunch of soldiers out there solving problems without that support mechanism. Okay, so now again, here's the result if you don't have enough practitioners or if you have too much. Too little trained resources will not be able to keep up with the project demand. Management's going to want this, and they're not going to get it. They're not going to get enough of an impact that they need. But if you have too many trained resources, they'll either be under-supported because there's not enough leadership to support all these projects, or they're going to be underutilized. Now again, going back to lean principles, if I've got a $200,000 piece of production equipment, I want that thing to be pretty close to 100% utilized. I'm going to be measuring things like uptime, downtime. You know, how much am I getting out of this asset that I've purchased? Again, if we have 16, or I'd just throw out a number, but if we had 16 practitioners and we can only use 5 of them, the other ones are either going to be doing projects that aren't supported, or they're not going to do projects at all. And what's going to happen then is that inventory of knowledge that they were trained is going to start to deteriorate, just like as if we had inventory in our warehouse or inventory of any kind of consumables that we had. If we don't use it over a period of time, it's not going to be as good as it was when they were first trained. Same thing goes here. We don't want to invest into building this lean practitioner or this Six Sigma expert and not utilize those skills, because that inventory that's in their mind that we paid for and it's in their warehouse, their brain warehouse, it's going to deteriorate. So in summary, when it comes to cost, all projects need to be properly scoped, staffed, and supported. If you're part of this webinar right now and you're a leadership team, you really need to look inside yourself and look inside your company and say, how many projects do we have going on right now that we really aren't involved in? What we do is we maybe have them send us something, or we have this little communication plan going on that's very, very efficient but not very effective, to try to throw a drop of water on the flower once in a while. That's not good. You need to really look at it and say, if we don't have these project teams properly staffed and supported, and if the project isn't scoped right, let me just define to me what scoped well means. If it's scoped well, if you look at SMART goals, there's 2 of them in there, which is achievable and it's relevant. And I'm going to just say that a little bit differently for a moment. If it's scoped properly, 2 things are going to happen. The team is going to be successful because it's achievable, and 2, the management team is going to be highly impacted because it was relevant to my needs. So if you've got projects that aren't giving you the return you need to scope them. You need to find either another project or scope it broader so that you get a return. And if you've got projects that aren't being able to be completed quick enough or on time, either one of those 2, you really want to look at how can we chisel out a sub of that larger project in a way that the project team can get some good flow. Anybody here that's ever done a value stream map, I mean, it's all about information flow, people flow, process flow, material flow. When a Six Sigma project, if you put together a value stream map, it's the same thing. What we want to do is we want to have good flow through this project. We don't ever want to get to the point where it stalls out, it gets stuck. And one of the ways to make sure that you have good flow is to set the scope properly. So I've kind of beat this dead horse a bit, but again, #1 fail mode is management not supporting the teams. One of the biggest causes of that is these three things. If you've got a really poorly scoped project, they're probably not going to support it. And if you have too many practitioners, they're not going to be able to afford to staff them all and support them all. So we don't want to build up too big of an army that we can't support. The last sharing subject is this. I want you to be a visionary for a moment. I want you to be a visionary for a moment. This is a typical service company or manufacturing company. Let's go through the workflow. Just humor me for just a moment here. So if it's a service company or manufacturing company, either way, so a customer is going to place an order for a service or a product. There's going to be some kind of a scheduler or a planner that's going to take all the orders that we have to do, and they're going to prioritize them. They're going to say, this is the ones that's ready. We have all the materials to do this. The customer expects it tomorrow. We better get this one done today. Whatever that logic is, the master planner. So I'm going to point here to make sure we're all on the same page. But where it says customer's going to place an order, somebody's going to plan or schedule those orders. Once it gets put out into the service line or the production line, there's going to be typically a supervisor involved to make sure that that service or that product was put together with high quality, quick delivery, and low cost. There might also be a subject matter expert involved to help in the production if the operator or the service representative gets into a jam. But they're in support of the operator. And the operator is going to go through some process to administer the service or to build this widget. I'm sorry. This operator is going to go through some process to provide the service, and then the job's complete. And at some point, there may be some inspections. Even though inspections are non-value-added steps, there may be some inspections. Now let's look at this next slide. I want you to really look at this, and I want to change the way you think if you think that it makes sense. Let's look at the next slide, because this is a Six Sigma deployment. This is the way I deploy Six Sigma. So instead of having custom orders at the very top of this process, it's project ideas. Now that my Hawkeye that I'm going to give you, even though it's a single user, you can have all the ideas put in there you want. Now you can get it. I mean, I can create it for you where everyone in the company can put project ideas in, or whoever you want to have access to it. Or you can go with another approach. But it doesn't matter. The bottom line is what we need to be able to have the voice of the customer, the voice of the business, and the voice of the process. We have to have a way to get that information into a central location so that the management team or whoever selects projects can have all the ideas in one location where they can prioritize and select the right project based on resource availability and timing. Once they select the project, unlike production or in a service environment, we don't have a supervisor and SME, but what we do have is we have a champion, which is usually a manager that has enough availability to help the team if they need roadblocks removed, but they're also there to be able to watch the flow and make sure that they are building it with quality, delivery, and cost. There's also a mentor to help them with more of the technical challenges, with maybe some of the steps or the tools used in Lean or Six Sigma. And instead of having an operator producing this service or product, there's a project team. Now this project team doesn't go through process 1, 2, 3, and 4. For a Six Sigma project, as an example, it would be they would go through and define it, measure, analyze, improve, and control it, and then they'd close the project. So in a factory, this might be shipping a product, and in a deployment, this would be closing a project. And instead of an inspection, there's a tool gate. So I just want to introduce you to a vision of what I believe is a really good way of doing a deployment. Make it look and make it perform and make it run just like the core business that it's servicing. And that takes me to the point where we can have some questions, and I'd like to answer any questions you have. I also want you to take my contact information down. If you would like, if you'd like me to create you a system, I would love to. I would have no problems doing it. And
Tom.
Paul, if you would, I'd like to open up some questions.
Yeah. So everybody, if you have questions, put them. Type them into the question box. I do have one question. It was from the earlier where you were talking about scope, staffing, and support. What method do you use to get everybody together to do the scope, staffing, and support for a potential project? In other words, do you have like a kickoff meeting? I'm assuming is what they're talking about.
Well, let me see if I can address this way. And I'm going to challenge you to. I'm going to answer any questions you have now, and you got my number and you got my email. You can call me about anything. I'd love to help. I really would. But I'm going to give you something that I think is really helpful. Sometimes what we do is we run our business this some way and really well. And then for some reason we run Lean and Six Sigma a completely different way. So I'm going to answer this like I would if I was running a Lean culture in my business. So first of all, staffing and support. If you've spent any time reading anything about Lean or being trained in Lean, one of the things that's really kind of an important characteristics of a Lean culture or a Lean environment is a pull system. And going back to my earlier comment about I wouldn't have more practitioners than we can support. So that's really where it starts. If we have 50 green belts or 50 Lean practitioners as an example, and we can only drive 5 projects, they're not going to be supported and they're not going to be staffed properly because it would starve the company if we did. We just can't do that. That doesn't make any sense. Now, as far as let's say that we have the right amount of practitioners or the right amount of belts. The next thing is that how I teach it is that when I have a green belt that goes into the control phase, once they go into the control phase, they develop the control plan, they put things into motion. Now they're just really monitoring and controlling the process. It becomes less time consuming for them. At that point, I have them pull another project out of the hopper. So to me, what triggers another project to be launched is either you have a new student that's getting trained or you have somebody that's already been trained and they just got a project into the control phase. Once that goes into the control phase for a Six Sigma project, but once it gets into that area where it's less consuming, that should trigger, just like a Kanban system would trigger, that should trigger an event that says, hey, we have a resource coming available. Let's get ready to give that person the resources and a project that we need next. And again, based on what the management needs. So the staffing is really a function of making sure you have the right belts. And the second thing is we don't want to create a push system. In other words, if you just, oh, we have another problem today, let's give that project to Joe, and then this one to Karen, and this one to Bill, and you just have a push system just jamming projects into this highway that's already got a lot of stuff going on, it's not going to get staffed and nothing's going to get really done. It's just going to create a lot of angst and a lot of confusion. As far as the scope goes, typically what I do for that is I have the management team tell me what they want. And then what I have is in the very beginning of the project, and at the very beginning of the project, I'll be looking at that project, that problem that they want to solve, and using things like Pareto diagrams, investigating, talking to people, getting a better understanding. I'm going to see if I can simplify the challenge a little bit by narrowing the scope. If I can, then I'm going to go back to management and say, hey, you said that you wanted this, but 80% of this problem is in this one area. I would like to narrow the scope to this part. That way I can get a dream team in there. We can give you a quick turn success, and we can move forward. So as far as the scope goes, I usually challenge the project leader to tell management if they can scope it down some. I mean, sure, if the management team can deliver it already properly scoped, that's great. But even if they don't, the practitioner should always be looking at it and saying, what they really want is this. How can I get it to them as efficiently as possible? Just like inventory turns. I mean, you want things to turn quickly. Well, projects have to turn quickly too. So I want to challenge management. A lot of times management don't do it, and I'm not going to bust on management, but if management doesn't do a good job of scoping it, then the first thing that the practitioner should be doing is saying, is there any way to get a real impact for my manager in a way that makes my team reduce the risks of project failure and allow us to deliver the goods really quick so we can make that manager happy? Is there any other questions, Paul? That's the best I can do without probably, asking more questions and getting a better understanding of the circumstances. So that's really a generic answer, but it's a pretty good one.
Tom, I do have a couple of more questions. One is, what are the most common types of projects in your history, Lean or Six Sigma? And maybe even why?
Yeah. Well, here's why. First of all, I'll start out with it was Lean. And the reason it was Lean was because I started doing Lean before Six Sigma was even around. In fact, I went as far as doing Lean projects with Danaher. I started that in 82, 83 time frame. I didn't actually even hear about Six Sigma, even though Bill Smith coined it earlier than this. I didn't really even hear about Six Sigma till the early 90s, like 90, 91 time frame. But by the time I heard of Six Sigma, we had done so many Lean events and so many Kaizens, and we had 5S, everything that we've had at this point, we had, I don't know, 8 years already doing Lean. So when we started getting into Six Sigma, there was a real focus on Six Sigma at that point, and I did a lot more Six Sigma for many years after that because that's where the opportunity was. So in other words, we leaned everything out to where we squeezed all the waste out in a pretty substantial way, and now we were at the point where we were up in a tree a little bit higher where we really had to use some more analytical tools to be able to break through and have this performance or capability that we never could enjoy before. And now, I would say in the last 10 years, it's been a pretty even split. Now, when people ask us, this is another thing that I think is really worth saying too, because and this isn't on me. This isn't saying something or bragging about me. This is bragging about what I've told you. I try to wrap up some of the most important things that I think that would help you the most, and I say that now because when you, I think I lost my train of thought there for a moment, but yeah, I think I did. I'm an old guy, and I think I lost my train of thought there. Yeah, I'm so sorry. I can't help you anymore with that because my brain just had an Alzheimer's moment.
Let me actually ask you, so I don't feel so bad now. Let me ask you, here's kind of a follow-up question. One person said, there seems to be a lot more people interested in Lean than Six Sigma. In your opinion, do you think Six Sigma is going to get replaced by Lean?
I'm going to say it will definitely not get replaced by Lean. And I'm saying this because, I mean, a true understanding of Lean versus a true understanding of Six Sigma, they really complement each other, but it's not an either or. They're really now what people do. In fact, I do this myself. When I teach Lean now, instead of using PDCA as the roadmap, I use DMAIC as the roadmap. So instead of having companies support and manage and all this having two different methodologies, I use one methodology. So whether I'm doing Lean or Six Sigma, I always define it, I always measure it, baseline, I always analyze the waste if it's a Lean, I always analyze the root cause if it's a Six Sigma, but I go through the same roadmap. The only thing that really changes is the tools that I use to be able to answer the questions at each phase along the way. So I don't see where Lean is going to replace Six Sigma, and again, it's because there are key fundamentals in Six Sigma that aren't found in Lean, and there are key fundamentals in Lean that aren't found in Six Sigma, but they do complement each other really well. And again, even in Lean, we can talk about continuous improvement, which would be more of a culture from the bottom up, where everybody is constantly trying to improve their own process. And then there's the other Lean, the other side of the coin, where we have Lean projects that have a definitive end. So it's no longer continuous improvement, but it's process improvement. So we have process improvement projects. It's defined, as such that we're going to reduce the cycle time by this and by this date, and when that's done, then that Lean event's done. It's not going to continue. That's a specific, dedicated set of resources we have to do this. That's not the same as having continuous improvement, where we're going to have the people in these different work areas constantly try to evolve their work area as a day-to-day Gemba walk and a day-to-day view of trying to look for opportunities. So one of them is more of a high level where management's going to be looking at areas where we have a lot of overtime, or we need to reduce the cycle time or improve the throughput. It's all about flow, but management's going to be looking where we have to really move the needle and get beyond where we've ever done. They're going to start a project with a definitive milestone date. Now that's a project. On the other hand, if we teach people 5S and we teach people Kaizens and we teach people to constantly be looking at how do we want to set up our work area to be more efficient and more effective, have higher quality, and we bring that down to the culture level, the continuous improvement level, that's different. But all three of those are independent of each other. I don't think that a lean culture will ever replace projects, because a lean culture is only going to be able to get lean culture is great. So, this isn't me bashing lean by no way. But lean is gonna get you to the point where you're as good as you can get without breakthrough changes. And a lean project is really designed to say, how can we do this even beyond that? And same with the Six Sigma. I mean, right now we might be at a 4 Sigma at some process in a company, and that's the best in class. And we want to get to 5 Sigma. Well, we're not going to do that with just brainstorming and 5 whys. We're going to have to get out and sharpen some real tools here. We're going to have to really get into this and be able to figure out how to do something that's never been done before. That's my opinion on that one.
Okay.
Paul, do we have any other questions? I hope we do, because I'm hoping we can get as much meat potatoes out of this as we can.
There's actually, I have two questions left. A couple of terms that you used earlier. You used the term mentor and the term champion. What's the difference between the two?
Wow, good question. And I wished everybody asked that question, because it's a very important question. If let's say I'm a lean practitioner or a green belt, it really doesn't matter. But either way, I'm going to be tasked to create change. I'm going to be tasked to make an improvement somewhere. But in my level of management, which may not even, I probably am not a manager, so at my level of the company, if my team, if I can't get somebody to answer questions, if I can't get somebody to help me brainstorm, if I can't get somebody to come up with some ideas and some pragmatic solutions, if I can't get people involved to help me, I'm at least going to expand my cycle time. But probably even more devastating than that is, if I come in there with answers because I couldn't get the people who was actually in the process to help support me, and I just come and say, hey, here's what you're going to do from now on, it's going to be really hard to sustain those things. So I need resources to help me figure out the problem, the root cause, the solution, and help support the sustainment side of it. So what a champion's real main responsibility in a project is to remove those roadblocks that green belt or that lean practitioner can't remove at their level of authority. So if I don't have anybody that's allowed to talk to me, let's say the shop floor supervisor or whoever it might be says, look, I can't give you access to these folks that know the process. My champion's got to be an advocate for me and help remove that roadblock. Now that does not mean that champion is a good mentor, because the champion's typically a manager with a lot of horsepower, a lot of leverage. They can make change. They can affect the resources and get me what I need. What a mentor is somebody like myself, somebody that's done a lot of project work, somebody that, I'm getting to this point where, I've got resources, but I'm not really exactly sure how I want to approach this, or I got to do some kind of a gauge on R, I've got to do a value stream map in this area, or whatever it is, and I just don't know really how to approach it. What a mentor is more of an analytical expert. They may not have any leverage with people, may not be able to give you those kind of resources, but what they can do is they can say, I've had an experience like that before, and here's what I would recommend. So a mentor is more of either a lean or a Six Sigma expert with a lot of experience that you can go to and say, I'm struggling a little bit, don't really know how I'm going to approach this particular area of my project. And a champion's one you'd go to and say, you know what, I really want to get access to this area to do some analytical work and study and collect some data, but I can't get in there. I can't succeed or meet my timeline if I can't. So champion, I'm going to need you to help me on that. Did that help?
Yeah, I think that was a great answer. We have one last question. You've talked a lot
Oh,
about
right.
you've talked a lot about the belts, the black belt, that kind of thing. You also talked about subject matter experts. What if the belts people that have the belts aren't the subject matter expert? Will the belts lead the project, or the subject matter expert lead the project?
That's a great. That's these really are great questions. Here's my answers to that one. Again, now I can't say that I've done it, but because it's me and my two brothers. But me and my two brothers, we've participated in over 18,000 projects, and I can tell you with 100% certainty, I'm not the subject matter expert. Neither are my brothers. What we're the subject matter expert in is how to approach problems and solve them in a sustainable way. So the answer to your question would be, in my opinion, is that the project leader doesn't necessarily, he can or she can, but doesn't necessarily have to be the subject matter expert, but has to be able to lead a team from a problem to a root cause to a solution to a sustainable, controlled process that lasts until the next person comes in and creates different change. So my answer would be that the black belt doesn't have to be the subject matter expert, but he or she can be.
Okay.
The subject matter expert should be on the team, though. I mean, you need people that are intimately involved with the process that's being improved, but it doesn't have to be the project leader.
Perfect. I just wanted to reaffirm here because we're coming to the end here. The slide that you currently have up has all your contact information. So for the people out there that are still listening, if you contact Tom, he will set you up for the online system that you can use as a single user. And all of his contact information is right there. Tom, is there any last comments you would like to make before we sign off?
I think the only thing I'd like to say is that there's a lot of really cool things that we've learned. This is a short webinar. And I think that the two things I'd like to really say is this. When in doubt and you don't really know how to go through with something, go back to the lean principles and say, what would I do if this was my business? Run it like a business. So that's the one thing I'd like to say. And the other thing is that if there's an area in your deployment or in a project or just any kind of questions you have with lean, and say, look, I'm not somebody other than Tom Dunn. That's who I am. But at the same token, if you think that I might be able to add an insight in your questions, you got my contact information. Feel free to call me or email me anytime and ask a question. I'd be more than happy to answer it for you.
I am Paul Harbath, the 2015 chair of the ASQ Lean Enterprise Division webinar series. I want to thank Tom for his excellent presentation and thank you for listening to Tom Dunn's Lean Six Sigma Deployment Made Easy. If you have any questions about the content of this webinar, feel free to contact Tom directly. Next month, our speaker will be Jeff Hajek from Valaction Consulting, presenting Structuring Standard Work, Making Standard Work Work Better. Standards are the basis of lean. Standardization is the method used to create these standards. Using standardized work to create standards for routine work is one of the most misunderstood tools of lean. Jeff will be using his extensive experience to simplify the process for us and help us understand the pitfalls of creating effective standard work. Jeff is the principal of Valaction Continuous Improvement and the author of many books, including What Do You Mean I Gotta Be Lean? The ASQ Lean Enterprise Division webinar series is the place for you to hear the best of the best in the lean industry and learn more about how to apply lean in your application. The American Society of Quality Lean Enterprise Division is a global network of professionals helping individuals and organizations apply proven and leading-edge lean principles and practices to achieve dramatic results for personal and organizational success. Come lean with us.